All right, so today we're gonna put these lids on. So these are the lids I made last time, this one and this one. This was the body I made last time. So let's look at that. This one, whoop, fits in there really good. You see that, how that one already fits? Woo, got lucky John, right? Yeah, not yet, right? Because remember, I threw it to fit. Now this guy is a different story. It doesn't fit on there. You see that? Not quite right. So that means that this area here is too broad. That is okay for that to be too wide. Let's pull this aside. So what do I need to do is need to trim this in right here. You see that? So it'll fit down. So we can center this. And so this is where tap centering comes in really handy, right? Because I'll center it up really fast. I will get some clay out. I'll hold it down. We don't need too much clay here. Right, so I'll get a little bit of clay for this. Why? Because I can't have a lot of clay going on because then it rides up the side. I need to trim this side in, right? So I'm actually going to use really small pieces of clay and moosh it down. This will be number 2. Moosh it down, and then I'll just get one more small piece. Because I need this to fit, and it's fitting down to about there, but this rest of it's too thick. So I'll take this guy here and just start whittling away at it. I'm pretty sure that I can be a little bit aggressive here. Okay, I might have gotten there. So what I'll do is I'll just pull it off and check again just to see, because, oh, I trimmed off a lot, dude. Okay, so it fits perfectly. Woo. So now this one fits. So what we're going to do with this guy is, we'll do this one first, right? So just like, remember the other lid, I trimmed it on the pot, remember? So we will do the same thing, because that way when I'm trimming, I can see how this one looks. Now we already have a pretty good idea how that one looks, right? So actually let's start with this one, because this one will be easier. So the top area looks pretty finished. You see that? That looks pretty done. Now when we flip it over, you see there's some stuff we can remove from there, and then definitely need to do something with this part here, right? All that's not good, because it just needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Now this, without this, right, it's very difficult to trim, right? I can't just leave it there, right? So what we're going to do here is flip this baby over and use that and trim it inside there. We already have a chuck that fits it perfectly. If this didn't fit into here like that, the way it does right now, let's say this was too big, I would just take this off, center this, and then trim this area so it fit, right? The one thing that I can't do is if this is already too loose, I can't make it fit tighter. That makes sense? Because I can only trim this wider or trim this smaller, right? I can't. All right, so let's flip this over. So what we're going to do is use this as a chuck. So I'm going to tap center. When I'm tap centering, I'm watching this inner ring, right? I want to center to that. It's close. Got to start over again. Nope, it's close, but not there. So tap centering works. So that's pretty good. You see that? I'm pretty happy with that. Now I can use bigger piece of clay. So remember that I'm centering this part before I trim it, because once I trim this part down here, it'll weigh a lot less, and this foot will be, the width of this down here will be smaller. It'll be more prone to just flopping over. What? Yeah, so don't trim the bottom first, right? Always trim the bottom after, because it just gives you more weight. Now, does that mean you can't do it that way? No, no, no. You can still do it that way. It's just you want to give yourself more chances to be successful, right? Does that make sense? Like, you want to stack the deck in your favor as much as you can. It's already hard enough, right? So always my philosophy is just make it easier for you to do try to make it easier for yourself to do a good job, right? And then you have extra energy for you to do a even better job than that. If it's too many steps, it's too difficult, then it's really hard to do a good job in the first place, right? All right, so that's ready. This flops over in here, so I have to trim a little bit at this edge, and I just want to finish this part here. So plop it in, and then get my trimming tool. I'm just going to first trim this edge right here. Hopefully I'm not going to beat up this other edge here. Right, I just want to be careful I'm not trimming into this edge right there. That's feeling okay. I'll come back manually do that, and then here I'll do this. Now, You see that I could have wet that rim down a little bit. If this was the only lid I was going to trim today, I probably would have, right? But I still got to do another lid inside there. And I'm more concerned about that lid fitting than this one, right? As far as getting that one fitting perfectly and all that. There's more work I have to do with that one. So I'm not going to use the water trick to stick this one down, right? So you see I'm just trimming that edge in. How far or what do I want to do? It's up to you. Right, so now let's make sure that this is flat. What's wrong with this? It looks pretty flat, but it's not quite. It's some rippliness there because of the wire tool, right? When it cuts it, doesn't cut it even often. Let's see if we can just use this and see what happens. See if this will take it. Oh yeah, this is doing pretty good. It's pretty good. So it's starting to make that look flatter. So I like doing this. I really enjoy this, making two things like this fit. I think of it as being super fun, right? I kind of enjoy making sure doing this last step, right? So for me, the most joy comes from actually working in the clay like this. Like the least amount of joy for me is when I'm glazing. I mean, I glaze, but right, I'm not looking to greatness through glazing, right? I'm really looking for my pots to look really good and finished when they come off the wheel. So here I'm just trimming that area a little bit flatter, making it look beautiful. All right, that's looking pretty good. All right, good. So that's the lid on this side. Let's flip it over. So I'm gonna have a hard time getting, oh, I can get it out, I think. Go. Then clean off the gallery because we don't want lots of clay in there, especially as we get to the next lid. So we might have to trim some of that off. Not really, just bashing off some clay that was stuck in there. Oh, there's still lots there. All right, so let's see how it fits. It should fit better. Oh, so much, it looks pretty good. So I'm pretty happy about how that is fitting. All right, so that's lid one is basically done. There's still a little bit of garbage and stuff in there, but you get the picture. So this is the most important one. That's why we're saving it to second, right, to last. So here I pop that in. Right now I'm gonna trim the snot out of this. Like there's a lot of verticalness I'm gonna trim. I'm gonna trim this down and then make that the dome, right? So I can just, so this, when I trim, I'm gonna be trimming a lot more clay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wet this surface down so when it hits there, it'll stick.
You want a sponge?
Sponge or something, yeah. I forgot to bring, I thought I brought water out, but I forgot, I think. All right, so, oh yeah, perfect. So I'm just gonna wet the surface down a little bit, right? Just a little bit so that it just promotes a little bit of sticking, right? So it doesn't move again once I get it on there. So now I can trim down this whole vertical surface here, right? And there's a lot like what we just did, except at the end of this, I won't be able to pick it up again, right? So because it'll be this round kind of dome shape, right? And I won't have an edge anymore to pick it up. Right. Correct. Yeah, I know that, because I know that I got that much verticalness to trim away. So I'm starting that. I have to trim that more off of this outside edge than anywhere else. So I just spend some time getting that edge down. And then just like before, I slowly work that curve in, right? So I know probably here, right here in the middle, I'm not going to trim off hardly any clay. And then as it moves out, I trim off more, right, to get the downward angle. So you see I spend more time moving into the middle, but I don't spend that long because I still actually have a lot of clay to trim off from out here still. So you see that there's still that vertical distance. If there was that much, if I trimmed that much vertical distance out of the middle, I'd have a hole through, right? That makes sense. Remember that I have to remember how I made it. Remember I was being very conscious about how I was opening, I was raising up, right? And leaving a curve on the inside. So right now the curve is going that way. I have to be careful. I can't be too aggressive because it is a lid, right, in a gallery that's in a pot that's really fairly high up in the air, right? It's not down against the wheel. And then that pot is now being held by these things, right? So there's there's like a lot of places where this could go badly, right? And the taller it is, the faster it can go badly, right? Because it's has a higher center of gravity. So now, but this is feeling pretty secure, so I'm not too worried, but you can't be as aggressive as sometimes you would want to be. So you see how I'm starting to get closer, right? And I'm starting to establish this dome. It's beginning to look like this is going to look really good because you see how we're so close that I can almost trim that whole dome, that shape all the way across. You'll see it here in a second. It's going to be close to what I want. So I go back and trim some more. Right, so I'm just starting to work my way into the middle. All right, so it's starting to look like a stone or something, right? What do people think it looks like? Like a rock, maybe. Right, so you see how now it's starting, you see how I'm starting to connect those curves? That would be very difficult to do if you were trimming the lid separately, right? Because I could just have the lid off and on against the wheel head and just be trimming, but you wouldn't know how the whole thing looks together. It's always super important that they look the way you want them to look when they're together, because that's the way it's going to spend most of its time, right? So there's only a few moments, whoop, whip it off to your thing and put it back on, like get the sugar out or cotton ball out or jelly bean out, and then you put the lid back on, right? It's not going to really spend really that much time with the lid off, right? The only time it does spend time with the lid off is when you break the lid, and then you just have the bottom, you just live with the bottom, right, for a long time. All right, so you see how it's almost there. So now I have to really begin thinking about this shape, right? I don't have that much clay here to trim off here, right? But I could trim off a little bit, right? And I need to be really economical about how I do it, because it feels like there's kind of, now that I feel it and now I'm really looking at it, it feels like this is kind of flat here, right? It's curve, 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 and it comes up to about here. There's like a flat part where it doesn't curve in as much. So it's really nitpicky. So I'm gonna try trimming off just a little bit of this this right here to see if I can get that curve going in. Now this is something that's just important to me, right? But it's important that you listen to yourself, right? That's what makes your pots important to you, right? So for me, it's super important that I take a crack at trimming some of that off. And I'm talking about a very small amount, like I could already be done, right? So what do I feel? I feel curve, 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 and now there's a slight break. There's still a flatness there. So I'm going to trim that away a little bit to see if I can work a little bit. Oh, it feels so much better already, even though there's still a flat. You guys see that flatness there? It's a little flat. I'm going to try a little bit more, I guess. But I don't have too much more to give because I'm going to start trimming through this gallery space. All right, so I'm close. I think that there's a little bit of a bump here, so I'll trim a little bit more away of that. Keep moving it up and down though, right? So I don't get a flat spot, right? There we go. So I think we're pretty close, right? It's kind of like this rock shape or something. So now I need a rib, so I'll get a rib, and then I'll use this like a trimming tool because I really am kind of done trimming. I think that it's there. It's just it has all these sureform lines. So I'm going to hold this bent and I'm going to trim with it, right? You see that? How? See the clay coming off? I'm actually trimming this like that. Now this pot isn't exactly correct as far as wetness and dryness, meaning that the bottom was a little bit too wet when I pulled it out a couple hours ago. So I stuck it out in the sun and I can feel it. Like I wish it was a more uniformed wetness and dryness, right? Just so that to make it easier. But you see how I'm really smoothing that out? Then I'm going to trim a little bit more off of here. This clay in here is a lot wetter, so it's not responding quite the way how I normally would want it to be. But it's doing okay. So you see how that's slowly starting to come around. So you saw it, right? Now, was I super intentional about that curve? I wasn't really thinking about making a continuous like domey shape. But that's what I saw when I put the lid on, that it had that potential. I wasn't really thinking that hard when I was doing it. I was thinking about more just making one that worked. But once I saw it on there, right? I saw the potential for that being an option. I did also see that I have to trim some of this part off, right? Oh, I dug in. Damn, John. Boop, 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 boop. Let's clean that up really fast. All right, so I'm there. I feel like I'm there, right? I'm feeling pretty happy about it. The other thing I got to do now is really smooth it out. So I'm just going to spend some time just trying to smooth it out. Now, there's an issue, right? Because now I have this lid that's stuck on here, and unlike the other ones, how do I get this off, right? So this one has a knob, right, already built in, right? I can do lots of different things here. I could pull a handle or something, stick a or just stick a random blob of clay on. But let's throw one, because you haven't seen that yet. I need some clay. Which here, we'll use this clay. So what does this mean? All we need is a little blob of clay, right? So I could just roll something out, right? Like a ball, and just stick it on there and say, woohoo, I'm done, right? But that's no fun, right? You already know how to do that. I could pull a handle or whatever. So I'm gonna wedge this piece of clay up using this little technique like that. You guys have seen this before, and then I make it into a coil, and I roll it out again. Because can you imagine trying to wedge this little thing like spiral wedging, right? And you have to do it 100 times, right? No way. All right, so we're gonna roll it out, and then this is still mixing the clay up, right? By rolling it up and then doing that, right? This is probably a lot more efficient for a little piece of clay. Think about it, right? It's like, you know, those Japanese sword makers, they make the thing and it turns out it like has like 1,000,000 layers or something. 'Cause all you have to do is fold it over like 11 times, right? And then you have 11 million billion, I don't know, might be only 100,000 layers. I might be exaggerating, I don't know. It really might only be 100, I don't know. You guys would know. All right, so now this is wedged up really good, and then I need a way to attach it on there. So I'm gonna get a needle tool. Can you get me a needle tool, Andy? I forgot to get a needle. I forgot that, I mean, I knew I was gonna do this, but it's been such a long time, I forgot. So we're gonna score this, but we're gonna use the benefit of needle tool, and I could just start here in the middle. Let's go top down for this. And I'm just gonna hold my needle tool here in the middle and just slowly spiral out. You see that, how I'm able to score a large area really funly, right? And then if I really think that that's not enough scoring, I could just go wiggle it back and forth like this. All right, so that's really scored. And I drop some water on there.
Special effects of art.
Yeah, that is, right? So I did that, so you don't forget, right? That's a possibility, not a big deal. So now this is more clay than I need, because when I stick it on there, right, that knob just seems too giant, doesn't it? It just seems kind of too big. That's okay, because I can make it smaller later, right? I want to make it kind of ball-like. It's okay if it's not perfect, right? And I'm just going to smoosh it on like that, put it kind of in the middle so I can send it spinning kind of in the middle. Right, so now we got to attach it. Ooh, some water ran down. We didn't want to do that because that could stick it down to the gallery really good. All right, so then what we do is we just take our finger and go mush, 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 smush, mush, 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 mush. So wiggle, wiggle. I forgot. I did that, didn't I? Wiggle, 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 like that. All right, so now that's on there. Not looking good yet, right? Not kind of negative. Sorry. I gotta just turn off that, All right, so here, I'm gonna throw now. So now this is like centering a little itty bitty piece of clay, but I only get to use my fingertips for this, right? So this will take some practice. And so you go really fast, as fast as you want, right? Just like centering, woo, right? And this is and then you go back down, woo, whoop, some piece came off, not the end of the world, as long as I got enough. Now, if you're having trouble centering, like this is like a little bit not like you see how the top part's pretty centered, but the bottom part's not centering. Now, normally I would just center it all, but I want to give you guys a couple different solutions for doing this. You can take your trimming tool and just trim this in the center, right? Does that make sense? I'm just trimming off the not round part. That makes sense? You see how little clay I had to take off? Right, so you see how that part's centered, that other part's centered. Then I just make sure it's getting woohoo, baby, right? And then I'm back down. All right, So guess what? It's a lot like the way how I did this knob last class. We start from the top and work our way down. Now, the first thing you gotta do actually is decide if this is enough clay, if it's too much clay or about the right amount. Now, you have to think about it as you go, meaning there's gonna be a spout on here later, there'll be a handle on here later, it could be a handle that goes over the top, could be a handle, right? So I don't know exactly yet, but this is, you gotta build something first and make some commitments, right? So I'm pushing this back down. I'm kind of assessing, and you can have like a short kind of stumpy looking thing, right? This is kind of short and broad, right? As long as you can get your hand in there and grab it. So this has a little bit of flare. So let's just goof around a couple different ones. So just like before, you form the top of it first, right? So there's a couple little things we could do here is I could just use a rib like this and just shape it a little, give it a chance, John, right? And you can see that there, and then I could just have it there, and I could just call it done like that, right? That's good enough. It works. Is it working for the form? Not really, right? It's a very kind of, the overall shape is very kind of rectangular, and this is this very bulbous looking, round looking thing. So if you don't know what to do, just replicate something else that's already there. So I kind of don't know what to do. John said we have to put handles on. It wouldn't work, so I have to come up with a handle, right? So, and then you kind of don't know what to do, right? You're not, maybe you don't consider yourself an artist. You have like a low artist self-esteem or something, right? So you gotta use the things that you have, an idea that you have, right? Because you don't know what looks good. What will look good is a lot of times you just replicate this shape like on a smaller version, right? That makes sense. So you just mimic it and then it'll look probably okay, right? I'm not guaranteeing nothing, but if you make something really square and rectangular on here or triangular or whatever, that's not going to work. So what am I doing for this top here, right? I'm looking at this top and then I'm looking at how this falls away, right? This isn't quite there yet, right? This really falls away pretty quickly, right? And this is still kind of squarish, right? So I'm really eyeballing it and like, I want this to be like the mini version of this, right? So it's not quite there yet. And it could be more than just shape. It's a feeling too. Like how much presence does it have? Is it like feel like it's expanding outward, or does it feel like it's collapsing, or does it feel like there's surface tension on it? Like, you know, when you blow up a balloon and it gets really big, you can just kind of feel the tightness of the surface, right? All those things could be happening here. It's not important that other people think like, oh, I feel surface tension. Like, no, but they will somehow feel something because you're being very deterministic about the form, right? You're making conscious choices, not just sticking a piece and randomly ending up there. So it's not quite there yet, but it's getting closer. I think that this needs more fall off here, right? It's too. So I'm just going to try to use this. Ooh, that wasn't right. Got to have a clean rib, right? And I'm just going to try to shape it using the rib a little bit. So even though it doesn't look as good, I feel like that's getting closer, but this part isn't. This is feeling better. And now I'm going to wet it down again and just keep shaping it, right? There we go. Oh, so you see that to me looks much closer all of a sudden, right? And you kind of have unlimited time. As long as you're just working on the top, you can kind of keep fiddling around for forever. If it looks like it's not working, you know, it's only a smidgen amount of clay. Just rip it off, start over, right? So here I just shaping. I'm pushing down more side. Ooh, it's getting closer, right? You guys feel it a little bit, right? Now, I have a funny view of it, right? My view is more like straight down, but the straight down gives you a view too, meaning like sometimes it looks good this way. Make sure when you get to these pots that are really curving like this, when you look down, you can't really see it falling away, but you feel it falling away, and then you want to feel that falling awayness here maybe, right? So look at it from the side, look at it from the top. It's not quite there yet, but we're getting close. You see how I'm just slowly working my way into something that I think will look good. Ooh, it's getting closer still, I think. So now I feel like I'm starting to get into the zone where it's too much, right? I think, I don't know, right? I'm getting a little nervous, right? Because this isn't a shape that I practice a lot. So I'm like making it up as I go, but that's kind of fun, right? Because you get to see me thinking through the idea as I'm progressing, right? So, okay, so that's getting really close to something that I want. Now, it's still kind of stubby, but this would actually kind of work, right? That makes sense? Like this could work. There's a couple ways to undercut it, right? So I could come back under here with this tool. So I used to do this for a while, is I used to just take the tool like that and just trim it back a little bit, right? To try to clean up the underside, right? Because I wasn't confident about my ability to do anything else, right? And I kind of like doing that. And then that gives us more of that. And then I could come back in here and clean that up, that trim mark a little bit like that. You see that? That works. Or I could do like I did before with my other one and just push this area in with my fingers, right? So make sure this area is wet. You go fast and I could just start squeezing underneath. Now, when I do that, that is gonna elevate the knob, right? The knob is gonna squirt up because in order to make this narrower, that clay has to go somewhere and it ends up pushing the knob up. Just like before, as this gets undercut more and more and more, this whole knob gets weaker, meaning there'll come a point where I really can't even touch the top anymore because it'll only be a thin rod of clay holding the rest up. Later on, that's not a big deal, right? Because as it dries and after it gets bisfired, clay becomes more like stone, right? So you see what I just did there is I undercut it more, right? And now you can really just get underneath and grab it. But you see how much more elevated it is, right? So as a unit, right, I think before looked better. What do I mean? That this is now maybe a little bit too high up in the air, right? Does that make sense? For like proportionately, it's like looks a little strange, right? So I don't know, not much I can do about it now. So maybe I can undercut this part a little. So you see how I'm not worried about the top of the knob. I'm really focusing on this under part now, trying to get that part looking more good. I'm gonna really floor it. See that? And then really get it rounded. So I'm feeling okay about that. Now, if you're still a little bit worried about this, I can still come back in here and trim this out just a little bit more to get a little bit cleaner down there, right? Now, these never crack off hardly at all, right? Because they're attached so good, right? And when you're making these, you're really focused on quality, meaning you're doing all this management, a lot of dryness and wetness. If this gets dried out too much, I wouldn't even attempt any of this, right? I would just scrap the whole thing because I still got to pill the spout and the handle and put a strainer in, right? If any part starts going sideways on me, I just abandon it, right? Because there's no use for me to spend another hour after this working on something where the knob and the handle are all just going to fall off, right? So because there's more commitment to this, right? All right, so I think that's good, right? I think we're good enough, and I can take a little bit of a sponginess here to that. And then, you know, the trick is, if you can, ooh, I added way too much water, is to not mess with this for a little bit, meaning like I am not gonna take this lid off, right? This one just comes off, right? But this guy, how do I get it off without screwing it up, right? It's stuck and I can't use the knob to pull it off. So I need this to dry out a little bit so that I can get the knob, I can pull the lid off later. So once the knob settles down, once the pot dries out a little more, they'll just come apart. That makes sense to everybody? The one thing I am worried about is I did drip a lot of water down. Usually I'm much more careful about that. So I'm worried that some water ran into that gallery space and it's just sitting there right now. But all right. Oh, I do got to trim the other side. So I do have to get it off. Man, I forgot about that step. So let's see if it'll come off. Nope. All right, so we have to get it off. I forgot, we got to trim the bottom. And I knew that, right? Going in. I knew that I still needed to trim the bottom. So here we go. I'm going to try this trick where I bend this rib and just going to jam it in there. Because, why is that okay? Because this is too sharp, right? These are really sharp, tight edges. I want to round them off a little. Whoop, whoop. So there's a little bit more roll in, right? Going in, just like these knuckles, right? When I push them together, right? There's a rounded part going in, a rounded part. And that looks natural. When it's too sharp like that, it looks, to me, a little bit uncomfortable, right? So I'm going to round those edges off. So I'm going to stick this rib in. It does go more straight down. Ooh, it's going in really beautifully. And then we'll see if we can get this off. All right, so now it's off. Woo! So I got to be super careful of that. Oh, now this will be good because I'll trim back that edge and that will give it a little bit of a gap, right? But I don't want to mess with that right now. And then we're going to quickly trim a bottom on here. Tap center. All right, so this is curving under, right? So this is a lot like as if I had trimmed the bottom on it already, right? So it's going to be really tippy because it's so rounded over, right? So how do you prevent it from just tipping over as much? You roll out your coil, and then what you do is you pinch one side of that coil into something like that, right? This little thin part will sneak underneath there and help prop it in, like the way, you know, you chalk up your tires when you get a flat tire. You just don't jack it up. You're supposed to put a rock or a stump or something underneath your other tires to keep your car from rolling away. Same thing here, right? Because it's so rounded under, we do that, and I shove that under like that. So it's more supported underneath the round part, right? As best you can. And then I'm pushing this down, because one thing you're doing as you're pushing this down, the round part, the clay could go under and like lift your pot up a little bit as you're pushing it in, right? And then we move it like that, and then I do want it to be a little bit thicker, and then we'll thin that edge out some, and I go underneath, right? Underneath, like that, pack it in. Now, there's another thing that you could have done, right, is I could have gone with little itty bitty coils, right, and shove them way under there. Like, what if they're really flat, right? I could shove it way under, but it's only touching way under there, right? By making these fatter coils, it's actually pushing back way out here, right? So it's broadening out the base. Right? So once again, I shove it, make a triangle looking thing, and then I shove it under there while holding it down, and I push down. There we go. So now we're ready to trim, right? So I'm just thinking the foot will live somewhere right about there, somewhere about there, outside, inside. I'm just doing it super fast. All right, here we go. Trim, trim, trim. So remember that I already planned on that's a little, see there's a little bit of bulkiness there. I already planned to trim that away. Right, when I was doing it before. Remember when we talked about that, I push it out just a little bit more on the outside. Whoa, it jumped a little bit, so it spun. Let's see if we can just spin it back. Ooh, it spun. We'll see how long that, oh. All right, we'll try again. So if this doesn't work, we'll get out the Griffin grip. Okay. I was being a little bit aggressive there on my trimming, a little bit too aggressive. So it kind of jumped out of this little thing. Now, I kind of like this, meaning right now I view it as a challenge. Like, can John trim this without screwing it up? Because I like it that there's a part of me that likes that it just jumped out for a second. So right now, it gives me something to really do. It's not boring anymore. That makes sense? It's like kind of more exciting for me to now try to trim. So I reshape these a little bit to try to see if I can get more stuff on the outside, right? I'm gonna push down here on the other side while I'm pushing down. So there's symmetrical downward force here, right? You see that? So it's less chance of it jumping away, right? You see that, how I'm doing both things at the same time? So it's like as if I'm trying to replicate the same pressure from here over here, right? Because what happens if I just do one, there's just torque on one side, drag on one side. So that side wants to stop and jump out. So I'll push down here and do the same thing, right? I'm trying to do the same thing. Now, there are those little discs that you can get where there's a disc and you just hold down here and do that. I'm not that excited about the disc. I like it here, right? That makes sense because it's symmetrical then. Right? I don't like asymmetry, and there's just something about it, right? The discs are more enjoyable for bigger things, fatter things, whatever, right? But ooh, see, it did it again. It just vibrated away. My goodness. And oh, right. So what we're going to do is recenter it like that, and then I'm just going to push these back down. Not as hard a fix as the other time it was. All right, so that's as far as we can go. So now I'll use this corner here, right? And we've seen this tool before, and I'm going to trim straight down here, start showing off my foot. So you see I'm trimming right-handed even though I'm left-handed, but my left hand is touching always. So I always just think that my left hand is driving. So does that make sense, everybody? So for you guys that are lefties, that's the way to do it. Now I can trim this way, but I always feel weird trimming with just this tool in front of me. Feels weird. So I always use this tool righty. It's something I didn't really realize, right? Because I almost always use everything lefty most of the time. All right, so that's feeling like my foot, but then there's all this stuff. And then you see there's like a blob of clay right there that's gonna, every time that comes around, it's gonna be a problem. So I'm just gonna flatten that out right now, manual. So get it down to that surface, and then I'll start trimming away here. So you see that, how even though it's being held in my right hand, my left hand is touching, right? You see that? So mentally, I'm making it feel like my left hand is driving really a little bit. If I do that, it gets a little bit, see, I can't not have them. They always just got to be touching. It's a mental thing. Right, so I'm trying to get close. So this is feeling okay, but this is still feeling a little too broad. It's a little bit too oomphy down here, right? So I'm just gonna trim some of the oomphiness off. I'm hoping it looks good. Let's take a look. I'm gonna get underneath and look. Oh, that's looking okay. All right, so we're getting there. All right, I'm gonna trim this down just a little bit more and then trim this side down a little bit. Oh, it stopped again. Feels okay, not too bad. We're just gonna keep going. Ooh, it's really vibration-y now. Tap centering, right? And then I'll use this clay to push back down again. All right, here we go. So that's feeling okay. We're gonna trim the middle now. Just trim a regular foot in here. So do you see how I switched to my lefty, right? You see that? It's just I use these tools lefty. This clay right here is actually a little dry for some reason. Maybe this tool isn't as sharp, is what the problem is. It's just a touch dry, so I might have left it out just a little bit too long out in the sun to dry. We're almost there. All right, so I think we're close enough we can use this tool. For this part I do. For this, I don't like trimming over here like that. It's just because the angle is goofy, I think, and I can't see what I'm doing. For here, I will always trim this way because I think it has something to do with my vision because I can see here what my tool is doing, right? When I flip it this way, like you see how like my hand is in the way, even if I know I could do it, I could, right? But it has to do with a vision thing. So like here, I can see it better, right? It's more open. That makes sense? Nope. I just always I just trim, right? and it's something that I didn't do consciously, right? It's not something that I thought, oh, maybe if I did this right-handed, it would be better. And it's just over the years, it's just happened. And I think,
throw the wheel going the other way?
oh, nope, I have tried, but it feels like I'm a beginner. Like it feels like I know how to do everything, but can't do any of it. That makes sense. I know it's all wrong. So I did do that as a empathy lesson for myself to kind of get in touch back with what it felt like to be starting over again. That makes sense? So that I wouldn't be yelling at my beginner students all the time. That was a joke.
We knew that.
No, it feels really weird. If you reverse and you don't throw reverse, it feels crazy. Like definitely feels like, so now definitely I'm gonna take the time to clean off all this, right? Why? Because I still got a lot of work to do. I went through all that work to make a lid. I made all that work to make 2 different lids, really, right? And I want this to be beautiful down here. So I'm taking this and I'm using it like a trimming tool, right, to really smooth out all this beautifulness. There we go, almost done. That's good enough for me. And then I'll smooth this part out. Now, do I really need to go through all the trouble right now and really smooth this out? Not really, because I'm going to beat it up a lot. There's a lot of John Hasegawa handling time that's going to happen still. Still got to put a spout on and a handle, right? And that's a lot of work still. But I got that part smooth. I got that part mostly smooth. There we go. So that's my little pot, right, with either lid, right? So let's see, let's do some evaluation. There's lid number 1, right? And you see how that's very just continuous, like woof, right? Then when we do lid number 2, it kind of drops in there. And then there's one more trick we could do with this lid, right? So when you see when it drops in there, I could trim this down, this level of this thing down. See how this lid doesn't look that good anymore? There's something wrong with it because I trimmed this area out. I trimmed out all that girth that used to be there, right? So this lid doesn't look that good. It looked a little bit before, right? Better before when it had a little bit of thickness there, right? But I trimmed all that away to make way for that other lid. That makes sense to everybody? So I made a compromise on this lid. And so this lid maybe in general, all by itself, doesn't look as fancy because it's just, the form just kind of trucks up and then there's nothing, right? But if I put a handle like over the top of this, right, that would fix all that, right? Does that make sense? If I had a handle that attached here, went around and back down again, it would have that covered, right? And the lid doesn't matter. This lid prevents me a little bit from doing that. Why? Because this is already going so high up in the air, right? The handle would have to come up higher to be able to get in there with my hand and lift it off, right? So this one would be more better if we had a handle coming off the end, right? Just have a loop handle off the end, right? And then there'll be a spout coming off there. So we'll talk about this next time. So I have these spouts, they're getting dry, but this is a way how we can start thinking about how it will look with a spout, right? What do? I hold the spout behind and begin to think about the angle that it's gonna come off, right? But attaching the spout's gonna take some time, and I'm gonna show you how to make a couple different kinds of spouts, so we'll save that for another lesson next time. The trick is, this is already getting too dry. So I'm gonna spray it down, bag it up. This is already too dry, so I'm gonna take these spouts and we're just gonna dunk them in water, like bloop, 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 and they dry out really fast in this sort of weather. So it would be okay if I just threw these today and let them sit around for an hour. They'd be almost ready to attach, right? That makes sense? So I'll do that with both of them because I'm not really sure which one I'm gonna use. And you see how one is more like a cone that's tapering, and then one has like this cone shape, but then turns back in a little bit. And we can look at both of these next time, like which one we would want to use. I'm gonna dip both of them in water, like that. Any questions? All right, so we'll do spouts next time. And we're gonna do a spraying thing here in a little bit, right? So anyone who hasn't seen or wants to see how to spray glazes again, we're about to do it. That makes sense? So give me a few minutes to get that ready, and then we'll talk about spraying. All right.